Hello and welcome. It's me, John Davidson, your host for Career Coaching After Hours, episode 16. Can you believe it's already March 2025? Wowzer. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me. This is a very special edition. I'll try to keep the energy level high. I'm nice and caffeinated. And it is the midst of March Madness. And in this episode, I'm going to dive into a topic that I've touched on quite a few times in terms of how to find an employer that's a good fit for you if you're in career search mode or career pivot mode. And more from the perspective of maybe looking not just locally, but regionally or nationally or globally. And maybe sidestepping a lot of the lists that folks often take a look at, like the Fortune 500 or various best employers to work for or work with type lists. So I had a lot of fun these last couple of weeks building up some March Madness style brackets. And so even if you're not in the Pacific Northwest or maybe not even in North America, I hope you can find some value in kind of digging a little deeper in terms of which organizations make a city or make a region really special. And maybe even how to align your career search maybe with organizations that are doing amazing things that you care about. So I made several brackets, and if you've been taking a look at my LinkedIn posts, you've seen those already, or maybe you follow me on Medium. But part of the reason I started this series is so I'd have a place where I can dig a little bit deeper and kind of meditate on some of the issues and topics that I deal with. So we're going to dig deep in terms of the best employers in the Pacific Northwest, and we'll see if even 160 of them is enough. So thank you very much for joining me. As usual, this series is audience agnostic, so if you are one of my clients, wonderful, that's great. If you're not, well then maybe you should be. And so I thoroughly hope that you enjoy the series, whether you're a client or a non-client, or maybe you're a hiring manager, maybe you're in human resources, and you like some of the topics that I'm dealing with. I cover a whole range of issues. And as usual, yes, we've got wonderful music. I've got a new music lineup for this episode. So this is a bit of an unplugged approach to career coaching. And as usual, disclaimers, I'm probably not your career coach, so this isn't necessarily advice for you specifically. So hopefully a little bit more education than entertainment, but maybe a little bit of both. Maybe it's some edutainment. Oh my gosh, we don't hear that nearly as much as we probably should. So as usual, check your sources. If you notice any typos or if I goofed up, let me know, or if I accidentally say that some organizations on the Fortune 500, hopefully I've got the best data. And I think I've thoroughly checked everything, but let me know if I goof something up. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, etc. All right. So here's the cover shot there. And again, I would love it if folks would not only hear this presentation, but then kind of go back onto LinkedIn. I've actually linked virtually every single one of these organizations to some of the posts that I've done. So if you want to maybe follow some of these organizations or learn more about them, great. Maybe you live in the Pacific Northwest, or maybe you're considering moving here or relocating here. Wonderful. We've got lots of great employers, lots of wonderful reasons to live and work in the Pacific Northwest. And what really makes the PNW special? Well, a lot of folks would say it's some of our employers who are saving the world and building all kinds of new technologies, whether that's in aerospace or software or AI or robotics or a million other different areas. So I'll dig deep into each of these brackets so we can take a little bit closer look at who they are. But if you've been watching my series, kind of the genesis for this idea popped up in episode 8, I believe, as a preview. And many times I've talked to clients about this idea of, well, what if you could do your own job fair, your own career fair? And so career fairs, I think, are actually a lot of fun, but a lot of folks stop going to them kind of after the high school or the college years. And so I think they can be great for young adults, but once in a while I'll see a really neat job fair with some pretty solid presenters and organizations and employers. But if I could wave a magic wand, this is kind of my attempt. This is 26 different organizations here in the Metro Seattle area, essentially, where if I could have like T-Mobile Park for a day or Lumen Field for a day, these are some of the heavy hitters I might invite. So if you notice, I'm not trying to disinvite anybody, but you don't see Microsoft or Boeing or Amazon or the Fortune 500s, maybe some of the super big employers. But I've shared this with a bunch of clients, partly to kind of spark their thinking about, well, maybe part of a career search or a career exploration should be organizations that you give a bleep about. Maybe you buy their products. Maybe you think they're doing something awesome or amazing. Maybe you never thought you could work for the Seahawks or the Mariners unless you were an athlete, and they have lots of different jobs for all kinds of folks. Or fly some spaceships with Blue Origin, or do some nuclear fusion with Helion, or I don't know, come up with some new Pokemon. So some of my favorites, and again, I'm biased, but these are some pretty neat organizations. And I think you're more likely to see some of these t-shirts on folks around the Seattle area, or Portland, or Spokane, or Bellingham, what have you, Eugene, Boise, all these wonderful cities we have in the PNW, than maybe a Microsoft shirt, or an Amazon shirt, or a Boeing shirt. And those are great organizations too, as well. But that's kind of the genesis to this is, well, what if I could build that career fair? And then initially I built one bracket with pretty much all of them, and then I started to space it out into a couple, and that turned into 3. And then I did a 4th and a 5th bracket and stopped at 160, and that's really just scratching the surface. So hopefully didn't get under too many folks' skin in the rankings here, or the ratings. So what I tried to do is look at it more like a bracket and do some kind of interesting matchups, as opposed to trying to say any one of these organizations is better than any other. Again, lots of neat rankings out there, but I also feel like a lot of the organizations you'll see out of the 160 very often are not ranked anywhere or rated anywhere. They just don't seem to pop up on best employers in Oregon or Washington or Idaho or even Vancouver or Canada. So maybe spotlighting some organizations that are really awesome. So you will notice a smattering of some nonprofits, some other agencies, essentially foundations, what have you. Couple of rules that I put in is no states, so you don't see state of Washington or state of Oregon, and no federal government employers, no K-12. So there's a whole map on my website there if you want to see kind of the rules, quote unquote. But I'll go through some of these matchups, and obviously you can feel free to read along with me. And I'm sure you've heard of many of these organizations if you've lived on the West Coast for even a few months. So I started out with some of the athletic apparel manufacturers. You've got Nike versus Brooks. I think that'd be a neat matchup. Jones Soda, which is great. They have all kinds of wild drinks, and I still see their products out in the world. And then there's Starbucks, of course. Made their logo a little small, so sorry about that, Starbucks. And there's PACCAR, parent company to Kenworth. You'll see them a little bit later too, so I kind of double stacked them. Blue Origin, of course. Secretly, I would love it if Blue Origin would send me up in a spaceship like Captain Kirk, so no sales pitch there. Path and the Gates Foundation, I think they're doing amazing work in terms of global health. So if you've ever thought about working for a foundation or nonprofit that's really kind of shaking things up and trying to make the world a better place, Seattle's a pretty special place in that regard, where a lot of these amazing nonprofits are headquartered. Seattle Times, Mopop, got some questions about that kind of matchup. And again, these are all very much respectful, quote-unquote, matchups. So again, I had a lot of fun with this. I hope folks absolutely enjoy the rankings. Make your own. Feel free to ping me if you'd like a blank template. Not a problem. But the Seattle Times is the newspaper of record for the state of Washington, and Mopop is maybe the default museum on the West Coast for coolness. So I feel like they're kind of really distinct organizations that possibly could go toe-to-toe. Outdoor Research, I really like their products. Sorel, I really like them as well. I don't know if you don't maybe hear about them a whole lot in the news necessarily, but great. I think you'll find both their product lines at REI, for example. The Urban League, I kind of did a double post on them because I couldn't decide whether to put Seattle or Portland, and they're doing great work, all kinds of great workforce development projects, as well as free training. So if you're not aware of what the Urban League is doing, I think they're great. I post and comment some of their material there on LinkedIn pretty regularly. So again, wanted to show some love for some of the nonprofits as well. And then, of course, you've got some of the Jesuit universities here, private universities. I grew up in Spokane, so there's Gonzaga, but got my law degree at Seattle U, so we'll let them go head to head. And then next up, again, Mariners, Seahawks, and there's the Rain and the Storm. So a lot of great sports teams throughout the PNW. Valve and Bungie. It's interesting, how many times I talk to folks and they may not realize that both of them are headquartered right here in the Seattle area. So if you buy games on Steam, video games on Steam, well, there's Valve, there's the parent company. And even though Bungie was bought by Sony, hey, they still make really, really good software. I'm a big fan of the Destiny games. So then you've got King County, Multnomah County, two of the big counties here in the Pacific Northwest. I put them head to head. Wizards of the Coast, they were purchased by Hasbro, but they're still in Renton, last I checked, making Magic the Gathering and all kinds of cool stuff. And the Pokemon Company, right over there in Bellevue. So I think it's easy to forget that, yeah, we've got great big companies, Microsoft, Amazon, still a lot of Boeing jobs here, what have you. And Microsoft has bought Bethesda and a lot of game studios. So I think easy to forget that you've got some incredibly important kind of pop culture iconic organizations based right here in the PNW, in the Puget Sound area. Then I put Sub Pop up against Powell's, so two very iconic employers, organizations, you could say, crucial to building the culture that we have. Of course, Sub Pop, you might have heard of some of the bands and albums that they've helped get out into the mainstream. And if you're going to go to Portland, for crying out loud, you've got to stop at Powell's City of Books. It's a city block of books. It's a very cool bookstore. Columbia is right there in Portland. Funko in Everett, really cool. I've visited both of their corporate offices, so special connection to them. I put them up head to head. And of course, well, Costco and Amazon might be Fortune 500s, but I put them in the corner, kind of anchor spot there, kind of retailers duking it out. All right, next up is the green bracket, and I'll try to rattle through these fairly quickly, but you can kind of see that this is another attempt to look at different types of employers. So I tried to mix this up in terms of banking, retail, universities. Again, such a rich area that we live in terms of culture and great employers to consider. So I put Providence up against CMAR. I put two of my favorite radio stations head to head, KEXP and KINK in Portland. I think it's also really easy to forget that forestry is a huge part of the PNW. And last I checked, it's logging, forestry, still the most dangerous profession statistically in Washington. So be careful out there. I love trees, but I also love paper. So I put Warehouse up against Collins. They're in Oregon. A couple of great credit unions you might have heard of. Rogue Credit Union, BECU. I left a lot of banking institutions and credit unions off. So, be nice in the comments, please. But certainly feel free to make your own brackets. T-Mobile, Expedia, huge tech companies with massive presence here in the Seattle metro area. And then I had a fun, they're putting Bumbershoot up against Emerald City Comic-Con, was purchased by Reed Pop, so kind of interesting, but I didn't feel like putting Reed Pop in there. since they're not based here in the PNW, but just kind of two really interesting cultural events and fairs that I think it's easy to forget that they also are employers. There are lots of, if you really do have a love or a level of joy for doing something, it's not wrong to consider aligning, what you do and what you want to do and who you are, maybe with your employment options. There's Kidder Matthews in terms of real estate. I think very well-known brand in that arena, of course. Perkins Coie, a law firm, very well-known. Maybe, some of those firm names where you hear them, but certainly they're both based here and I think have a place here on the list. So I tried to add some diversity to these rankings and the ratings, I should say. They're really not rankings or ratings so much as brackets. And again, you could say any organization that made the list is totally my opinion. It has nothing to do with the reality of the world we live in, but I think all of these organizations deserve some love. So there I put OHSU, Oregon Health and Sciences University, up against Seattle Children's. Again, they're saving lives every day. They do amazing work. There's Nordstrom versus REI, totally different organizations, but I think sometimes REI doesn't get some of the heat and love and attention because they're not a Fortune 500. They're a co-op. Nordstrom is great too. I mean, I have a Nordy membership and I'm also a member of the co-op there. So I don't know who'd win that contest there. Both great. Portland Trailblazers, had to put them in. And I do remember a time when Seattle had a basketball team. There we go. And I put them up against the Kraken. That's kind of the best I could do. Still yet to see either of them professionally, so if those two organizations would like to send some tickets, that'd be great. Wazoo, UW. Again, I went to UW for undergrad, but I grew up in Spokane, so hey, it's the Apple Cup all over again. Have fun, great employers. Ronald McDonald House Charities, I put in, again, kind of similar to the Urban League. I put in both the Seattle and the Portland organizations as they are separate, but they're also part of the same mission, of course. And then I put Micron over in Idaho. Can't forget Idaho. I firmly believe the Pacific Northwest absolutely includes Washington, Oregon, Idaho, kind of at a minimum. I know some folks would say that includes Montana, Hawaii. Some folks would say it's BC. Slightly different definitions of PNW. But then there's Itron over in Eastern Washington. I think they're both really interesting organizations. Then there you go. There's Archie McPhee and Boo Radley's. And if you have not heard of them, then check them out immediately. So if you're in Ballard, check out Archie McPhee. Very cool store. And if you're in Spokane, check out Boo Radley's. But I don't think we'd ever see those two employers on a, certainly not a biggest employer, the PNW list, but maybe some of those secret places that have, just lots of cool stuff, gifts, and, the type of store you could easily hang out for an hour or two. But easy to forget, we have some very cool employers of all sizes and shapes. A couple of my favorite nonprofits, Fair Start and EarthCore. So I'm a little bit biased, especially with EarthCore there. I've been a part of several of their events. And then for some reason, I put Spokane and Boise up against each other, head to head, but great cities. There we go. I think it's easy to forget that we have all these great cities and counties, and we have all these government roles that are crucial, and all the fine folks that keep things moving at a city level, keep us safe, keep us protected, keep the roads clear and clean and safe. So here we go. It's bracket number 3. We've got 3 more brackets to go, 3, 4, and 5. So there, I put Seattle and Portland head-to-head. I put Expeditors up against PitchBook. Two, I think, really interesting organizations. Obviously, you've got 2 very different types of companies. You've got Expeditors dealing with supply chain, PitchBook doing their thing in terms of helping with software. So some of these may not seem like they fit, but I tried to kind of scooch them together sort of based on their their typology, if you will. Fleer, they've actually were purchased there. That's the parent company now, Teledyne. But I put PNNL right there, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, super high tech. So again, I think some tech organizations that maybe don't quite get onto the headlines or get into the press maybe as much as they should. And then for some reason I thought, I guess, ocean type stuff. There's Holland America Line versus Trident Seafoods. So very well-known cruise line. And you know what? I love their salmon burgers. So fantastic. They clearly go together. As you can tell, I put in a lot of thought on every single one of these matchups, and none of them were random whatsoever. Gerber and Benchmade both make knives. And it's really interesting, especially when you look into Portland. There, you've got this custom manufacturing element or industry that is pretty well unmatched. So if you ever find yourself needing like a pocket knife, it seems like most of the greatest ones are going to be built right here in the PNW. High Spot and OfferUp, they're both GeekWire 200s, so I did kind of pour over that list there, trying to look for organizations where I kind of knew what they did, so a little bit biased, but you could say the hot list of organizations that are going to be the next Amazon, the next Microsoft, what have you. Helion and Puget Sound Energy, they have to do with energy, so I squished them together. And of course, if you want a hamburger, you got Dick's Burgers, and McMenamin's is all over the Portland area, but they've also come on up here in the Seattle area too. So if you want a bite to eat, I don't think you could do too bad with either of those two options. And as we rocket through the right side of the purple bracket, we've got Microsoft and Nintendo. We're letting the Redmond Titans duke it out. Dutch Brothers is based in Oregon. And Chateau Saint Michel, I know I should have put more wineries, and I didn't put breweries in the list. I know, but I've been there, and so I'm a little bit biased. But again, trying to think about all these wonderful elements to the PNW culture. We've got the best coffee, arguably the best wine, best breweries. They can easily go toe-to-toe with anything in the Southwest or on the West Coast. Alaska Airlines, thumbs up. I like them as an airline. I don't love to fly, but I put them in there. And there's Fortive, which is a Fortune 500. And I put Fluke, one of their subsidiaries, on the list there too. So very large organization. And of course the Sounders, there we go, love them, but I had to put the Portland Timbers in there as well. Even though I've watched the Portland Timbers defeat the Sounders, it's PNW soccer, so there we be. And yes, I say soccer. Slalom and Kaiser, I thought went together because they're amazing organizations that it's easy to forget, and I use that phrase quite a bit, that Slalom, very well-known consulting firm. I've elbowed a lot of folks to consider working there. They have branches all over the country, but they're headquartered right here in the PNW, right here in Seattle. But also, if you live in Spokane, Kaiser is synonymous with one of the big employers. And again, great employers maybe don't always spend billions and billions of dollars on marketing. They're just great at what they do, and they're well known in their area. Or when you stop to think about who makes a region or a city truly run. Okay, then we've got Washington Federal, Umpqua, some of the bigger banks that are pretty well known, pretty well rated. I put them head to head. University of Oregon, Oregon State, they go together. And of course, I had to put Tillamook and Darigold up against each other to battle it out. Who makes the best yogurt? Who makes the best cheese? I don't know. You figure it out. All right. We'll cruise through the rest of these, and absolutely I want to hear the comments from folks in terms of how they think some of these shakeups might play out. Coupang, really interesting. This is an organization, it's a Korean company that actually relocated the headquarters to Seattle, and they are on the Fortune 500, which I think is just awesome that we we would have an organization do that. And so they're doing all kinds of amazing things with logistics and warehousing. Very cool stuff. F5, I think, definitely big props to them for being headquartered in Western Washington, but then they just opened a satellite branch over in Spokane. Another great tech company that I think sometimes maybe doesn't get the attention that they should. Maybe either of those organizations. So very cool. And there we go. There's Vancouver versus Vancouver. And part of the reason that I expanded that is if you see Lululemon is on the list there, right next to Dakine. And there we go. But it's interesting because the Fortune 500 actually lists Lululemon, which is based in Vancouver, BC, as headquartered in Washington. And I'm still not sure why they do that to this day. So maybe somebody can illuminate that for me. And some of these organizations are headquartered in Delaware, I believe, from a legal perspective. So some of these I may have goofed up on a technical element, but at least the majority of the operations are supposed to be here in the PNW. So there we go. Health and fitness, such a big piece of the puzzle here in the PNW. And you see that a lot, whether it's Spokane or Portland or Seattle, highly livable cities. So you've got Bowflex making great weight room equipment. I have some of their equipment. Precor, I think every gym in the world has some of their equipment. So they're both based here in Western Washington. Then you've got Porch and Payscale, which are both great organizations. Payscale actually tipped their hat to me there on LinkedIn, which is great. Thank you much. If you need to check a salary report, check out Payscale. Treetop, one of the things that I had to actually remind myself is, well, what about agriculture? You just can't forget about all the orchards. PNW is kind of synonymous with apples, potatoes, wheat. There you go. And wine too, and breweries and all the other things that we make. And of course we roast up the coffee, even though the coffee isn't grown here in the PNW. But if you ever had a glass of apple juice, it's likely thanks to Washington farmers. And I've actually been out to Talking Rain's facility. Very cool. So if you've ever had a Talking Rain, well, they're based here in Washington. And I had to show some love to the other baseball teams besides the Mariners. So you got the Spokane Indians and the Tri-City Dust Devils. You'll see the Everett Aqua Sox and Rainiers hiding out over there on the other side of the bracket. And I had to put Seattle's hockey team, the Thunderbirds, versus the Silvertips. Oh my gosh, here we go, to the right side of the bracket. I hope you're keeping score, by the way. Please do. True Blue, based in Tacoma. So there you go. Great organization in terms of labor management. And there's eXp Realty. They are a Fortune. They're on the Fortune list there as well. And then I put Bellingham and Bellevue as cities up against each other. So I didn't spare the cities or the counties, but I did take the states out of the running. And the major state universities there in Idaho, University of Idaho and Idaho State. There's Avanade and Remitly, again, some really neat tech companies based in Puget Sound. And some more power-oriented organizations, Portland General Electric, PUD. There's the Aqua Sox and the Rainiers. And what's odd is I almost forgot grocery because of some of the shakeups. So I was kind of like, well, wait a minute. What about Hagen? What about Rosars? Really well-known regional brands. You'll see, of course, I couldn't forget Albertsons either. But so much strong retail across the PNW, to say the least. And then I know we talked, I wrote about Stanley's Quenchergate earlier this year, I believe, and last year. And then Hydro Flask there is based in Oregon. So we've got to have a battle of the quenchers and the water bottle manufacturers. Of course, they make other things too. But here we are, the home stretch. I'll rocket through these. Primera was, of course, insurance. Beautiful campus there in Mount Lake Terrace. The Allen Institute. Wow, are they on the bleeding edge of science? Take a look at all the different things their scientists are working on. Very cool. Eddie Bauer has changed their logo, apparently, because folks are having trouble reading cursive. That's their new logo. And there's Arc'teryx, they're up in Canada, so I think really two very, very neat brands. So letting some of the manufacturers of outdoor and kind of high fashion outdoor equipment battle it out. But again, another area too is that I think defines the PNW is great food. So Dave's Killer Bread and Franz, I actually had a chance to meet Killer Dave. That was really interesting. I think what they're doing is really neat. They have a new parent company, but giving a lot of folks who maybe have been incarcerated a second chance. I think they absolutely belong here for not just that reason, but also some really great bread. And Franz, oh my gosh, I go to their bread stores. Tasty stuff. So I had to put Aaron Baker cookies up in Bellingham up against Voodoo Donuts. I'm biased because I love the cookies. I have yet to have the Voodoo Donuts yet. Please send me samples. I want everybody on this bracket to send me samples, please. And we've got Eastern and Western University duking it out. We got Bellingham versus Cheney. Great campuses. I've been on both of them, so lots of love there. GLY Contractors, Redfin. So if you've ever seen something built or ever seen something listed for sale in terms of real estate, one of those two organizations might have had a hand in it. A couple brands I really like. Third Place Books, great bookstores here in the Seattle area. And then Bartell, of course, they've had some changes there with parent companies and all that, but it's still local regional brand that I'm a fan of. And I've never met Gene or Ben, but I figured I'd let them battle it out. So great jewelry versus spas. There we go. I don't find myself in those facilities too often, but we'll let them battle it out. Great PNW brands. And as we roll through the final side of the last bracket there's Kenworth, and they make great trucks. I'm not qualified to drive them. Probably never will be. Les Schwab, I still think that's a great brand. And I remember the TV ads with Les himself. I elbow a lot of folks to check out Les Schwab for their tire needs. I might be a little bit biased. There is Albertsons, headquartered in Boise. Fred Meyer, of course, their parent company is Kroger, but they've got the deep PNW roots, and they've still kept those brands, which I'm a big fan of that. When a parent company still keeps the local brand, keeps that identity stabilized. And then we've got Zips versus Burgerville. So if I go to Spokane, I pretty much have to make a stop at Zips. And if you're anywhere in the Portland metro area, check out Burgerville. And if you've ever been in a Made in Washington store, you've probably seen Liberty Orchards and Chucker Cherries products. Very tasty. Again, please send me samples, lots of samples. I need samples. The Spokesman Review, newspaper of record there for Spokane, and the Oregonian. There you go. Great places to get your news. It's pretty rare that I think I ever see actual newspapers or news outlets in these type of top employer rankings, what have you. And then a couple of my favorite roasters. There's Delano's and Ladro. Fluke, really neat equipment that I'm not qualified to understand what it does. There we go. Again, parent company Fortive, but they're based right there in Everett. And there's Stoke Space, which is cool. All these reusable rockets. They're also a GeekWire 200. Pretty darn cool. I don't know if they'll be the next Blue Origin or if Blue Origin will purchase them, but I think big things to come from them. And a couple of neat tech companies. Check them out, Aptio and Smartsheet. So, wow, that was a marathon. Oh my gosh, I have broken past a half an hour in the presentation. So I Appreciate everyone listening through that and taking a deeper dive into the brackets. And maybe there's one takeaway from all this, even someone like me who regularly works with folks to try to find great employers or new jobs or a new career path, I don't think 160 is nearly enough. When you expand a search, even if you're looking at 3 states and 4, 5, 6, 7 major metro areas across every industry, this was a challenging project. So again, I've had fun kind of reminding myself some of my favorite employers. So I'd be very excited to hear some comments from folks. Maybe there's some arguably obvious employers that I left off, but I did put a methodology on my website. But yeah, as I've mentioned in the past, if you're considering a career leap or a different job or maybe a new chapter in your career, even a side hustle, something different, is maybe let the dog wag the tail. Instead of looking for open jobs, maybe consider where you want to work. If you really like what they build or their mission or their vision or their value statement, maybe that can pull a little bit more so than just the fact that there's an open job there kind of thing. So maybe think outside the box, burn the box, think locally, regionally, globally, what have you. But absolutely let me know who you think I should put into another bracket. I have a list rolling already for a 6th bracket. That should not be a challenge. But here's some of the sources that I frequently mention, and you'll find, like I say, lots of interesting rankings and ratings out there for 2025 already. If you'd like to reach out, there are my contact deeds. And in this episode, I had a bit of a mix, so several different artists for this special musical mix. I hope you like that as well. So thank you for listening to my nasally voice. Hopefully the music made it a little bit easier to handle. And thank everybody, clients, supporters, students, the viewers. Like, subscribe, comment, hit that bell, all of the things with YouTube. So be well, take care, and I'll see you next episode. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.